Graveyard Keeper just had its full release a few days ago, August 15th, 2018, and it's an interesting game which I think deserves a fair look. From its store page on Steam, Graveyard Keeper is described as the most inaccurate medieval cemetery management sim of all time. Build and manage your own graveyard and expand into other ventures while finding shortcuts to cut costs. The store page also suggests that you'll face ethical dilemmas and make questionable decisions. Well, heck, I'm into that. Let's make some money. The basic deal with Graveyard Keeper is keeping your graveyard. Corpses are delivered to you pretty regularly, and it's your job to dispose of them, in whatever way you see fit. This is the game's core mechanic, and it's a good one. By treating your corpses well, your graveyard thrives, which means the bishop likes you more, and you slowly unlock more and more church-related necessities and bonuses. But part of treating a corpse well is being good to it in autopsy, and when you do that, you miss out on all those yummy organs trapped inside. Eventually, you will have to cut in to progress in your skills and to complete certain quests which can be very profitable in their own right. This turns into balancing good corpses with bad corpses, burying good ones, and finding other ways to dispose of bad ones, potentially at a financial loss. This is the ethical dilemma the game talks about, and it sounds good for sure. The problem is that I'm a heartless monster who just doesn't care. Mechanics-wise, there doesn't seem to be much of a penalty for treating a corpse poorly. It's implied that throwing them in the river might come back to haunt you, but until I see it followed through, I'm going to assume it's harmless. And cremating a corpse, while expensive, both gets rid of it and gives you the burial certificate just the same as burying it, so all you miss out on is a little graveyard quality. This is interesting because the game has an NPC relationship system, as well as spiritual points being a form of XP. Either of these things could have been integrated as a way to dissuade you from desecrating too many corpses, but they weren't. That being said, while this is Graveyard Keeper's titular mechanic, it's not the only one. This game is pretty big. Keeping the graveyard also means keeping everything around the graveyard. I've already mentioned the church, but there's also mining and woodcutting to build your own materials, tools, and improvements, farming to provide your own food and please the townsfolk, and a combat system to supplement the other two. There are also story quests, which serve as both some form of guidance and a hook to keep your interest. These are all things that you have to balance, because they're all intertwined. This is best exemplified in the tech tree, which uses experience points from all fields to level up, the three fields being manual skills, knowledge of nature, and spiritual knowledge. Personally, I think this is great, because what it means is there's essentially always something to do. If you're stymied somehow in one field, you can go do something else for a bit until you're ready to tackle it. There's no pressure either, and the days bleed into one another in a way that is incredibly relaxed, alleviating some of the pressure of the energy system. Graveyard Keeper has been getting compared a lot to Stardew Valley, and I think this is one of the biggest ways in which the two are different. In Stardew, or at least if you play in the manic, economically driven way in which I play Stardew, there is always a pressure to maximize the amount of work you do in a day. Watering has to be done, bundles have to be completed, birthdays have to be remembered, and every day draws closer to the end of the season, where certain crops, fish, and events will be locked to you until the next year. Going to sleep to recoup your energy means you lose the rest of the day. This isn't to say it's a bad system. It's well segmented, and it makes Stardew an easy game to pick up and put down. Stardew's good for anything from 15 minutes to 15 hours. Case in point. In Graveyard Keeper, however, those segments are much less rigid, making fewer start and stop points. If you're out of energy, go to bed. Just lie down. And if you hear a corpse arrive in the middle of the night, get back up. You're not limited to sleeping at night, or until your energy is full, and this is a feature that I really like, especially since there are things that can only be done at certain times. This does, however, mean that it's easy to miss certain days of the week, because there's no sound effect to signal a change, and it's very easy to forget if you're not actively looking. Pair this with the fact that certain NPCs only arrive on certain days, and it can be pretty frustrating. Part of a bigger problem that I have with Graveyard Keeper, which is that the game assumes you have a lot of time to spend on it. Putting aside the energy and time systems for a moment, Graveyard Keeper is slow. Progression is slow. It's true that you're always doing or working towards something, but part of that is grinding. And not just grinding, but waiting. Gathering more iron is grinding. Putting it in the furnace is waiting. And while there are plenty of things you can do in the meantime, just walking toward those things is slow. The map is massive, but so much of it is empty. Walking from your house to the town takes what feels like an eon, long enough that I usually end up using this time to check Twitter on my phone. Even the shortcut you can unlock only shaves the time maybe in half, and it's a winding, inefficient path at that. It makes buying supplies or turning in your burial certificates a serious chore, and I'm sure other people had this observation too because the Day 2 patch added a teleport feature. That still doesn't fix walking elsewhere, however, like to check your various crafting stations, which are all placed in their relevant areas on the map, and can thus end up being tediously far away. The game doesn't include a crafting or blueprint menu, which means that if you're standing at your anvil and are trying to remember if the study desk required simple or complex iron pieces, you will have to walk all the way back to the church basement to check. It's even worse if you're trying to unlock an area of the map, which might end up being just as far away as the town is. Graveyard Keeper feels like a game you have to take notes for, and not just in crafting, but in remembering what you're supposed to do for some of the quests too. There's no quest log outside of this very incomplete NPCs tab, and most of the quest hints won't be repeated twice. I kinda thought we left this trend in the 90s, and it really leaves the game feeling unpolished, putting a raw taste in my mouth. This is also one of those games that required a day 1 patch, independent from the balance patch I mentioned earlier. The day 1 patch fixed some bugs, but not all of them. Here, let me show you something. This is the game running at 1920 by 1080, the default I got when I booted it. My monitor, however, is actually 2560 by 1440, so let's change it to that and see how it plays. Oh. I guess I'll change it back. Graveyard Keeper feels like it was poorly optimized. I've been cutting around it as much as possible, but I was also having some pretty consistent frame skipping while I was playing, once every minute or so, which isn't really enough to make me stop playing, but it doesn't exactly fill me with confidence. I have a pretty good PC, and a retro-style game like this, even with this kind of ambient lighting, shouldn't tax it enough to skip frames. It's a shame because this game does look really nice. Graveyard Keeper feels like a good game, but it's buried under a lot of problems. It's buggy and slow, the UI is clunky, tutorials and help are minimal, and while it advertises itself as comedic, the dialogue is so spread out that it doesn't really matter. Most of this game is just going to be hours and hours spent doing your own thing, if you manage to get to that point without getting confused or frustrated. If you do get there though, there is a good game here. It's not groundbreaking, and it won't be a phenomenon the way Stardew Valley was, but it has a deep potential. I could very easily see myself spending upwards of 40, 60 hours playing it, because despite its problems, it is engaging. But you have to be ready for that sort of experience. If you want a time waster, buy it. But if you don't, you're not really going to find anything else here. Thanks for watching, guys, and thanks to Tessa Reed for bringing this game to my attention. I don't usually do reviews for newer games, but if you guys like this sort of thing, I just might. If there's an upcoming game you'd like to see reviewed, leave a comment. And remember to like and subscribe so I don't spiral into an uncontrollable depression. Happy gaming!